David Jaffee exposed. I'm going to tell you all of the bad things that I've done in my life and all of the bad things about me. You see, the difference is a lot of these other people try to gain your trust by giving off the perception of perfection. And oftentimes our society is like that. If you look on Instagram and the high incidence of cosmetic surgery, and even Facebook, where people are trying to like stunt and finesse and just portray an image that is not representative of who they really are. So you have these situations where in the United States, around 70 to 80% of the people are either abusive towards their spouses, they have mental illness, they're in debt, they are addicted to pills, they're out of shape, they're pre-diabetic, etc. So we're not comparing ourselves against other people. You should compare yourself to be the best version of yourself, because you don't know what other people are struggling with. And unlike some of these other fake gurus, like I told you about, what they're doing is they're portraying an image of perfection where they're gaining your trust, but their real intent is to steal from you and to manipulate your trust and to exhibit sociopathic behaviors by manipulating you to gain your trust only to then steal from you. So I want to go into some of the bad things that I've done, but remember, the big difference between the people that you choose to follow should be the intent. My intent is obviously to build up my brand, to make money, to teach people, to help them improve their lives, but I'm not going to do anything that is going to be dishonest or to hurt other people, right? There's a big difference between hurting other people and stealing from them and trying to help them. That's why I believe people like Gary Vee, even though I might be a little bit critical because he doesn't focus on mental illness, I do believe that he has amazing intentions. Other people like Tai Lopez, I think that his intentions are a lot more selfish, and they're also a lot more unrealistic. So I think that someone like Tai Lopez is much more of a scam. Grant Cardone, I think that he in general has pretty good intentions, and he's straight up with them. He wants to make as much money as possible, but I also think that he's in general he's helping people. So everyone's like on the continuum, but you have to look at their intent. What oftentimes happens is these people give off an impression to gain your trust that they're trustworthy, but they have a lot of skeletons in their closet. So I'm going to talk to you about all the things that I've done in my skeletons in my closet. So when I graduated, so I've suffered from depression and OCD in the past. I was taking medication for about 10 years, and then I haven't taken medication in actually around 10 years. So I was able to help myself by doing like high-dose krill oil, saunas. I'm going to go into that stuff in another video, but I was suffering from depression and OCD. I graduated from Ivy League University, but I was taking a lot of pills like Depakote, Zyprexa, Neurontin, Paxil, Geodon, Luvox, etc., like all those stuff. Every single class of medication, whether it's an SSRI, tricyclic, an anticonvulsant, like all that stuff I took, and my body rejected it, and I did really poorly. Now, when I started working as an investment banker, I hated my job, and in order to cope with that, I started abusing the expense system. So the managing director of my group when I was at CIBC World Markets in the Industrial Growth and Services group was Mark Henkels. I think Mark is now one of the heads of Moelis Company, which is a pretty prestigious investment bank, but Mark never checked the expenses. So I would frequently send black car service out to girls who lived anywhere from like 10 to 60 miles away. I remember sending a black car to pick a girl up at like 3:30 in the morning from Suffolk County, Long Island, and bring her back to my apartment in Long Island. Or to bring her back to my apartment in Manhattan. This allowed me to sleep with around 40 to 50 girls that I wouldn't have ordinarily had an opportunity to be with. I also took these girls out to like I wouldn't say like lavish dinners, but dinners in New York City are pretty expensive. So we would go out, and then we would go to nightclubs, and then we would go spend around $100 on dinner. I would order taken, so they would come to my apartment, and then we would order delivery. So I expensed that. So that was wrong. I know it was wrong. If you want to judge me for it, that's fine. But like I said before, nobody's perfect, and I don't try to give you the impression that I'm perfect. I want to share with you everything. So that's one thing that I did. The other thing that I did, like I said, I suffered from OCD and depression, so I was taking a lot of medications. Additionally, when I switched groups at CIBC World Markets, I was working in the restructuring group, which was headed by Joe Radecki. I got my bonus, and then I switched to a really prestigious mergers and acquisitions boutique on Wall Street, which is Petsky Prunier. They, one of their best bankers that I've met is Sanjay Chadha. He is a managing director at Petsky Prunier, and we pretty much formed like 2-person deal teams where he would be the managing director and I would be the analyst on staff, and we completed probably around $200 to $250 million a year in transactions. But while at Petsky Prunier, and also when I was previously at CIBC World Markets, because I was able to get my work done so quickly, and at that time I was mentally stable because the psychiatrist found the right combination of medication to get me stable, I started promoting nightclubs. And the only reason why I started promoting nightclubs is that I wanted to meet women. And I didn't want to go out and spend a lot of money on girls only to try to impress them. But when you're promoting nightclubs, you have very high social status. So the funny thing was, at this time I was making a lot of money by working as an investment banker. So I started promoting clubs with the only intent of meeting women, because at that time I was very lonely. So the issue is that when you're coming from an Ivy League background and you're working in investment banking, and then you start working in the nightlife space, I started realizing very quickly that in nightlife, people are incredibly unorganized. They're self-destructive. They do drugs, they pop pills, they get drunk all the time, they overdose on cocaine. So I could put in about 1/10 the amount of effort as I was putting in investment banking and make just as much money in nightlife that I was in investment banking. It was a shocking revelation to me that people would go out to like Marquee and Home and Guest House and Lotus, and they would spend $5,000 on a table. And that happened all the time. Every single weekend I would have multiple $5,000 tables. And there was a time when I was making around $5,000 a week by promoting nightclubs, and I was able to sleep with a ton of girls. The issue with this is that I never really fit in nightlife. I was kind of like a lone wolf, mostly because I was burning the candle on both ends. So I would work really hard in investment banking. I'd put in at Petsky Prunier, I was putting in around 70 hours a week. It wasn't that bad for investment banking. And then in nightlife, I would send out emails. I would always gather emails, walk up to pretty girls. I remember I'd say, hey, I'm a promoter. I think you're cute. Can I have your email address? I'd like to invite you out to my parties. Then I would hand them my card to establish credibility. And then if the girl hesitated, I would always tell her, I'm not hitting on you. Like just deadpan, like straight up. Because when a girl's approached by a guy, she needs to feel comfortable and she doesn't know what your true intentions are. So around 7 out of 10 people that I would approach, they would always give me their emails. Probably around 1 or 2 of them would hesitate. So whenever I would say, I'm not hitting on you, it would automatically disarm them, and then it would put the girl on the defensive, and then she'd say, oh yeah, I know, no problem. Yeah, here's my number, or here's my email, here's my number. And then I would, let's say I would get, usually I would get around 40 emails a day, or a night every single time I went out, and of those I'd probably get like 5 girls that I was interested in, not just going out, but also like hanging out with, and then I would get those girls' numbers, add them to my phone, and then I would text them and follow up. And of those 5, maybe I would hang out with like 2 of them, So that was pretty much the shtick. But the reason did not appreciate how everyone just begged to be relevant. People were super flashy. They would talk themselves up, but they wouldn't work hard. So people refused to put in the time and the effort to work hard. Because remember, your success is going to be determined by what you do when no one is watching you. I work at 11 p.m. I work sometimes at 1 in the morning. No one's watching me, no one's forcing me, but I push myself to do it because I hold myself to a higher standard. In nightlife, I was really turned off by so many people who have a huge desire to be relevant and to feel like they're important and to overcome their inherent insecurity, yet they refuse to show this insecurity and they refuse to be vulnerable to the outside world. So instead they dress in like really lavish clothes. They'll have like, they'll drink themselves in order to get the pain away so that they feel better about themselves. They'll do drugs. Oftentimes people are overly promiscuous when they'll sleep with too many women. I did that for sure. And it definitely was very hollow. but using drugs or alcohol or self-medicating or giving yourself a higher degree of importance than is normal or that's healthy is something that really turned me off about the nightlife world. Additionally, it was very common that people would not keep their word. People would always show up late. Dealing with the club, sometimes you wouldn't get paid. And in order to do that, and in order to ensure that I got paid, I would have to put these clubs on email blast. And I always got paid, but in exchange for always getting paid, I actually created a lot of enemies, and that's something that I should not have done. Because, for example, if a club was late on paying me, I would say, okay, no problem. You're not going to pay me. I'm just going to put you on email blast to 20,000 people, and I'm going to tell all the people in the industry that you don't pay your promoters on time. So naturally, no one likes to be strong-armed, so they would pay me, but they would pretty much, they would tell people to write bad articles, and I just didn't make any friends from doing that. I remember one situation where there's this really successful nightlife promoter. He's still doing nightlife in New York City. His name is John Bakshi. And at this time, I was like in my early 20s. He invited me over to his apartment, and he owed me a few $1,000s. And he wanted to get close to me because he felt that he knew that like I worked really hard and I was generating a ton of revenue for him. But I went in there, and he tried to like make small talk with me and generate a conversation and a relationship. And I said, look, John, I don't give a shit about any of this small talk. I just want the money. So he wrote me a check, and then I left. And that was a huge mistake because relationships are incredibly important. And I think that was a huge mistake that I made, where I just didn't focus on building up relationships, and instead I created a lot of enemies in nightlife. And I wouldn't necessarily say I created enemies. It was just that I was kind of like I had myself and like 3 or 4 other people, and we just didn't really talk to anyone. Like we didn't really like conversate. Like people would reach out to me and they would want to establish good relationships, and I pretty much would just tell them to fuck off. This happened with the owners of Marquee, like with Noah Tepperberg. I was just like really to the point and very aggressive. And another thing I didn't like about nightlife is I would generate a lot of revenue, and then I would have like 10 people at my table, and then sometimes the general managers would be late at setting up our table, and I would just be really pissed because it would make me look bad. Or also I would argue with doormen, because if the doorman didn't want to let someone in, like let's say it's a very exclusive club and you roll up with like 3 guys, and then they say that they're on my list, the doorman is just going to say, oh, I'm sorry, that person doesn't have a list here, even though you're working there. But the reason why they tell them is that it's just an easy way to tell those people that they can't come in, because obviously if you're 3 guys, you can't just walk up to an exclusive club and have the doorman let you in unless you're willing to throw down money and buy bottles. But what would happen is sometimes the doorman would tell these guys that I don't have a list there just to get them off the line, and then those guys would get upset with me and think that I sent them to like the wrong club or things like that. And then I would lash out at the doorman, and sometimes I actually got the doorman fired for this, and that just created a lot of issues. So I threw my weight around because I was one of the most successful promoters, and it definitely caused a lot of people to now hold me in high regard because I essentially bullied them. I mean, just to be honest, like, in nightlife, things do not work like they work in investment banking. Sometimes clubs pay you late. Sometimes doormen they don't treat your people as well as you would treat your people. Sometimes the people who say that they're going to show up at 11, they show up at 1:30 in the morning. Sometimes people who you hang out with, they end up becoming alcoholics and drug addicts. And that's just the nature of the business, where you're working in a very self-destructive business. So I chose not to partake and not to ingratiate myself with other people, and it caused a bunch of problems where I just wasn't really well liked because of that, because I just never put in any effort to establish relationships. The other thing is, so after I got sick in around 2009, I started, 2009, 2010, I pretty much was trying to recover, and I was experimenting, going to Columbia University, doing like intravenous ketamine, repetitive transcranial magnetic stimulation, cognitive behavioral therapy, taking like high dose krill oil and things like that. Then I started renting out apartments. So I went to a really good hostel in Rio de Janeiro. I think it was called the girl from Ipanema, it might still be open. And we had like a really good group of people who were staying there. And I thought that I could recreate something similar to that in New York City. So what I did was I would rent out a huge apartment in New York City, or at least a huge apartment by New York City standards, like 1,500 square feet, and then I would put bunk beds in there. So I would fit a lot of people in there, and I usually catered to people who were staying internationally. So international people, and they usually stayed for more than 30 days. It was never like a hostel. It was like a long-term situation. I had some tenants who stayed with me for like over a year. And the reason why I'm telling you that this was bad is that the reason why it was bad is like there were too many people in the apartment. And that's what I learned later on. So even though you might think like, oh, this was, you created like an apartment, like a one-bedroom apartment, maybe it would have like 14 people in it, but it's not that much when you just have 7 beds. You have 7 bunk beds and you have 14 people. And it was a really great experience for people who just graduated from college and who are looking to make it in New York City. So an example would be like Broadway Dance Center. You would have some people who came over from Europe, and then they would stay in a great location, in a safe environment, and then they would also meet people who were in a similar situation to themselves. So they would stay in Times Square, be able to walk to Broadway Dance Center, and then they would pay about 1/3 as much rent as they would pay if they had like a 1-bedroom. The drawbacks of this is that they had very limited personal space. They could only have 2 bags of luggage maximum. There was no alcohol permitted in the apartment, no sex, but also I was very strict on interviewing everyone. I looked at everyone's like Facebook profiles. I would meet them at like the Starbucks and interview them before they even saw the apartment. So that was a really good experience. And I know that it has a negative connotation because you're operating without the proper licensing. But that was probably one of the best businesses that I was ever involved with because it helped so many people and I never took advantage of anyone. And in that situation, it was fantastic because I was allowing and permitting people who were traveling to New York City, which is one of the most expensive cities in the world, to live in great buildings in Manhattan and also to meet and establish and form relationships with many of their contemporaries. I still have people reach out to me and ask me if I have an apartment in New York City for them to stay at. I have had tenants meet their wives in the apartments. I've had people form lifelong relationships in the apartment. And the reason is, and just like options trading, the reason why it works so well is that we had very high quality people. We turned away about 60% of the people who wanted to stay there. Everyone was reviewed via looking at their entire Facebook profile. Everyone was interviewed before they even saw the apartment. They were told what the rules were, and this helped a lot of people, even though it is a negative because, like I said, we did not have the proper licensing to operate this and to rent out the apartments. But in general, everyone who was involved there, everyone who stayed there, they loved their experience and they were so appreciative. And like I said, I had a lot of people who stayed there for 6 months or 12 months, or I had one guy who stayed with me for a year and a half, and it worked out very well. The other thing was, so after this, I actually opened up a lounge, and so this, I tried to do everything by the book and tried to have it be extremely legitimate. Like, we got the licensing from the New York State Liquor Authority. We opened up, we spent like a good amount of money on the interior and the decor. And what I found out very quickly is that New York City is not very hospitable to small businesses. So this was my fault because we have been looking to open up a place for about 3 years. And then suddenly when we had an opportunity to open a place, it was in a residential neighborhood and I just assumed that everything would be okay and that we would have no problems. The problem is that when you have a party with 200 people coming in and out, the neighbors complain and they get upset and then they call the police. So what ended up happening, even though we were completely legitimate, we had to do illegitimate things in order to continue to stay open. So we had to resort to doing illegitimate things like paying the police $300 a week in just an envelope of cash that they would come every single week to pick it up. There were other things like we had to delay the SLA, like the neighbors would call the 311 and we would get raided, and it was just like, it's funny because the apartments were illegitimate, where we weren't licensed properly. For the club, everything was perfect, but except the location, obviously, which is why that venture didn't work out. But we put so much time and effort to actually establish ourselves and to be legitimate. And then what we found is that the neighbors don't care, the police don't care, the state liquor authority didn't care, and it's all like one big game. And it was really difficult because we put in a lot of time and effort. We wanted to do everything right. We were licensed correctly. We had the insurance. We signed a 10-year lease and all that stuff. And it's just, people are going to be people. And it doesn't matter whether it's the police, the state liquor authority, the neighbors. And, I'm not saying that we were completely innocent. We didn't. Like, there were times where we were overcrowded, for sure. Like, we probably, in some nights, we had twice as many people as the certificate of occupancy permitted us to have. So we were definitely not perfect either. So I'm not trying to insinuate that. But what I'm saying is that as long as you're not bothering other people and you're not provoking other people, then, that's the best way to run your business and to actually add value. And I really don't enjoy poking and provoking other people. But at dollars from an innocent girl from China, I feel compelled to speak up. Now, whether or not you want to agree with me, then that's completely cool. Like, that's your decision. It's your money. I'm not saying that everything I say is right. This is just simply my opinion. But I just wanted to share with you that, I'm not perfect. Like, do I have really good habits? Yeah, I believe so. Like, I eat very healthy. I exercise. I take vitamins and supplements. I don't smoke, drink. I don't do anything that's bad. In fact, I even do like some crazy stuff like, cold plunges where I'm able to submerge myself in really cold water for like a half hour at a time. So I mess with my body temperature. But the point that I'm saying is, you are the person who you are at this moment because of the habits that you have. Your past does not mean that you are destined to be someone that you don't want to be. So there have been some things like, definitely over-expensing and taking advantage of the black car service when I was an investment banker. That was definitely dishonest. And we billed it to clients. And then also like the apartments, I don't think that the apartments was dishonest at all, but I know that it's going to be spun that way because we were not licensed properly. Additionally, in Nightlife, when that's a big regret that I have of not establishing stronger relationships when I had the opportunity, because a lot of these people like, John Bakshi and like Noah Tepperberg, John B's probably worth like $20 million. Noah Tepperberg is probably worth like $200 million. And I had an opportunity to be close to these people and I just simply chose not to do it. So let me see if there is anything else. I want to say that luck plays a big part in your life. I remember a situation where this was about 2 years ago. I was driving my wife to a doctor's appointment and I was on my phone and this woman was crossing the street and I didn't see her and I almost hit her. Literally, I came within about 2 or 3 feet of hitting that person. And I was texting on my phone, which is something that I should not have been doing. And I almost hit this person. My life would be radically different had I hit that person. And I just want you to know that you can do everything right and still not be successful. So don't judge yourself harshly. Just put the odds in your favor, work really hard, and hopefully, probably around 8 out of 10 times, things will work out in your favor. But even if you do everything correct, you're not guaranteed success. There's no guarantee. Just like a lot of these people who I believe are frauds, they're doing everything wrong, but they're covering it up, gaining your trust, giving you the sociopathic, like neighbor next door, Mr. Rogers wearing a flannel shirt to try to appear like everything in their life is perfect and that they're just trying to help you, giving you like the Ned Flanders from The Simpsons persona or portraying that type of image. But when you scratch below the surface, these guys are really bad people who have bad intent. So the reason that I'm telling you is these people are doing bad things, but they are making a lot of money. And I'm not saying that money is the end all be all, but you can do everything right and still not accomplish your goals. And you can do everything wrong and have bad intent and still accomplish your goals. But I definitely think that you should do everything possible to establish good habits, to take care of your health, to commit yourself to be of service, to help other people, to make yourself vulnerable, and to be authentic, because nobody's perfect, to not judge other people unless you are willing to put out and air all of your dirty laundry past, which is a little bit shady, because everyone has done things in the past that they regret. So if you have any questions, let me know. My name is David Jaffee. You can go to BestStockStrategy.com and enter in your email address and receive over $400 worth of free training materials. I'm here to help you, and I hope that this video has shined a light and brought some more attention to some of my shortcomings and the things that I've done in the past, which I regret.